Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 112 of the CUInsight Experience. This episode is brought to you by our friends at PSCU. We love having them as a sponsor and allowing us to get to do what we do. As the nation's premier payments CUSO, the folks at PSCU proudly support the success of more than 1,500 credit unions. My name is Randy Smith. I'm one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and I'm lucky enough to have conversation with the amazing people who make the credit union community so great, and I get to bring them all to you. We get to pick their brains and see if we can't find a few nuggets that we can all learn from. My guest on today's show is Patty Corkery. Patty is the president and CEO of the Michigan Credit Union League. I had actually met Patty briefly at the last in-person conference I was at pre-COVID. Who knew it was going to take this long to have another conversation? I will just let you know early on here, it was well worth the wait. We talked about a ton in this episode. First, Patty's journey to the CEO office, how she went from a career in law to falling in love with credit unions, and what she hopes the future looks like for Michigan credit unions and, the credit union movement all over. Of course, we talked about leadership lessons learned along the way and over Patty's career and what her style is and will be as she's now in that CEO chair leading the Michigan Credit Union League. As always, we wrapped it up with a little bit of fun, the rapid fire questions. Who is that person that came to mind when Patty hears the word success? What book does she think we all should be picking up or reading if we haven't already? And what was a young Patty like growing up? You'll have to keep listening to find out. So, without further ado, I give you my conversation with Patty Corkery. Enjoy. Patty, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Randy. I'm excited to be here.
I was so excited to talk to you. As we were talking beforehand, we met briefly at the last in-person event either of us were at, the GAC. So,
yeah.
Good to see you again. It wouldn't have thought it would have been this long without our paths crossing, right? So, first of all, I have to start. Congratulations on being named the new president and CEO of the Michigan Credit Union League, the great state of Michigan. It's my home state as well. Also, the first woman ever to hold that title for the Michigan League. Congratulations. How's it feel?
Thanks, Randy. It feels great. I'm super excited. I feel like it's just another kind of offshoot path on my credit union journey. And, we have such a great credit union community in Michigan, as you know. So I'm super humbled to head up the association. I'm really excited.
That's fantastic. And you're taking over for Dave, who was, if I remember correctly, the guest 14 on the podcast way back when.
Yeah.
He's on to other things. I guess the CU Solutions Group just full time.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Very, very cool. I'll tell you, there was something that I was thinking about this morning, and actually Jill and I were having a conversation about it. So I'm going to kind of throw this one out there. But I'd love to get your thoughts. Historically, and I'm not trying to start anything here, there haven't been a lot of, let's say, women in the CEO chair in the league president role, but currently, with you now, Diana in California, Nevada, Caroline in the Cornerstone, those are three very visible in large and influential leagues. I don't know. It was one of those things we were talking about this morning, and I was just like, That's pretty awesome, quite honestly.
And you know what? I think it was the first day that it was announced, all of them reached out to me, the women that you just mentioned, and super, super nice. But there's out of the 35 leagues, there's 5 women president CEOs. So we still have some work to go, but I think you're right. I mean, we're heading up some of the big ones, so that's good.
That is pretty awesome. Yeah, Debbie and Tracy have both been on the podcast as well, so we've got you covered. We'll go down more. I was very intrigued to talk about your career path and all these leadership lessons that you've picked up along the way. But I'd kind of like to start the show with that big question. We just held one of our mini cons, and Jenny Blake was she was on the podcast, and she was our keynote, and she wrote a whole book on pivoting. We all had to pivot last year, and we had to do it a lot. And I know you had to at the league as well. But a lot of us, and this was something I think I was struggling with more in December, January, and I've been really trying to focus on it. But I know from talking to others, it's been kind of that thing too, is if we felt like we were just putting out fires a lot last year, we still need to think strategically. My guess is you wouldn't, have the job and the title you have today if you weren't a strategic thinker. For the folks out there that are listening who want to think past today and maybe look out a year or 3 years or 5 years, any hacks that you have that you've found to be able to think strategically in this crazy world?
Yeah, you're right, though, as far as when COVID first hit and just everybody in every industry was scrambling. And I think at the league, I worked more hours in a day than I did in the 3 years I had been there, for a good solid 2 months
Absolutely,
of working. And at that point in time, there was zero time to find really strategic opportunities. I think everyone was just putting out fires. And I think if we all had $1 for every time we said pivot, I think we'd be in Hawaii retiring now. But it definitely was the word of the year. So I think for me, it's, coming on board really just over within the last couple of weeks. But even as COO, which was my prior position, I would honestly just have to build time into my calendar, because I think a lot of us, our calendars aren't our own and people just fill stuff in there. And I'll wake up, I'll go to bed each night thinking, what do I have tomorrow? And if you're from meeting to meeting to meeting and you never really build in that time for yourself, I think that for me is the first big hurdle, is making sure I block off time where I'm not in a meeting. I don't have anything to prepare for except to just really think about the next 2 years, the next 3 years, the next 5 years. That's my number one, I think, hack. I have to get better at it. And sometimes I forget and I'm like, damn it, I don't have any me time in there. But that's something that I want to start getting better at doing, because I think that'll help me really just process and focus and think strategically, like you said. It's really just making sure you build that time into your schedule.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's such an easy thing to get away from, right? Like, where if you don't prioritize that space, and it's like, oh yeah, sure, I can take a meeting, I can take a call. So
you have to guard it. You have to guard it and be passionate about it. Yeah.
It was funny. I was a part of and have been a part of a CEO call since the beginning of COVID. And over the first couple months, something you just mentioned was that idea of like all the hours you were working, the first couple months of COVID. And across the board in the beginning, I kept hearing like how productive people were, but we all kind of were having that conversation like, but at some point there'll be burnout if we're working 100 hours a week, right? Like it's when we're Zooming and like it's, for people who've never worked from home, it's not like as credit unions as an industry was a big work from home type group of folks. So I think it's been an interesting transition over the past year and a half to see how people find that space and that balance, specifically for leaders who have to think strategically. We have to look forward, correct? So,
I agree. Yeah.
I'm a big believer in this idea that we are kind of the people we choose to surround ourselves with. Who have been those people? Who does Patty surround herself with, and who've helped you kind of get to where you are in your career?
Well, I think for me, my primary person is my daughter. She's 19 now, but she's kind of challenged me every step of the way and is a huge supporter. And I think we kind of learn from each other as, raising a girl into a young woman. I think that's been something that's really helped me, not only working with her and talking with her, but learning from her. And so she's one of my go-to people. But bigger than that, I think too, the women in this Michigan credit union industry, I'm very good friends with some of our credit union CEOs, from smaller credit unions to large credit unions. And we text each other all the time and stay connected. And they've been so supportive. And I feel like once you really get in there with those relationships, there isn't a dumb question. And you can pretty much ask them anything like, I don't know what I'm doing on whatever it might be. And what are your thoughts? And it's just a really great supportive community of women that I have. It's taken a long time to build it. I've been doing this over 20 years in the industry here in Michigan. So it takes a while to get those people. But once you find them, just like with any relationship, you just nurture them and you're there for one another. But I'm really fortunate to have a core group of credit union women in my life that really help me whenever I need it.
That is awesome. One of the things that friends, I'll just say outside of credit unions, don't maybe seem to understand is like how supportive the credit union movement is as a whole. The idea that we can ask each other questions or everyone seems willing to help everybody. It really is cooperative and collaborative, right? So
exactly.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, people helping people isn't just credit unions helping their members. It's us helping each other in the industry for sure.
Absolutely. It's one of the great things about it. Kind of another one of these bigger questions is we've seen a lot of consolidation over the past few years, and from conversations, I don't think any of us believe that it's stopping, and that's been, in the leagues as well as obviously in credit unions. I know when we started CUInsight, I think there were 11,000 credit unions and now we're 5,000. So,
right.
What is your vision, I guess, for the future of the Michigan Credit Union League, as well as maybe that bigger picture of, the credit union system in the great state of Michigan?
Yeah, well, I mean, agreed. I don't think that there's an end to consolidation, but I think for us as a league, the vast majority of our credit unions are small credit unions here in Michigan. And I think they have a very important place. And I think we just have to remember that they have unique needs and need unique support, especially from their trade association. So as my role, it's really making sure to engage them. And the challenge they have is finding the time. If they're if they're a CEO wearing multiple hats, they don't have time necessarily to come to a 3-day education event or participate in a bunch of calls because they're so wearing so many different hats. So I think really just working with them, making sure that they're supported. We work a lot with our state examiners, specifically on small credit unions, to make sure on the regulatory and compliance side that they have the tools that they need, which is why CUSG is such a great partner for small credit unions. So I think it's really just remembering that they're unique. They are resistant sometimes to help from larger credit unions because I think they're fearing the ultimate question is, hey, let's get our boards together. When
Come
really,
on in. Right.
Yeah, they don't have any interest in that. They do need support. But luckily, we do have a lot of large credit unions here in Michigan that are willing to roll up their sleeves and help support our smaller asset size credit unions without discussing merger. Just realizing that every credit union, no matter the size, has a place and a purpose in their community, and just making sure that they get the tools that they need. For some, merger makes sense. For some, it's ultimately what makes sense for that membership. But I think some of them, not so much. So it's really just making sure that they're supported and we're tapping into what their needs are and delivering.
Something that I was thinking about when you were answering that question was I viewed Michigan as an innovative league, just, as my time in the space. One of the things that we've seen over the past year is like that old idea that like credit unions can't move fast. We've seen all kinds of fast movement, to adapt and survive. Has there been anything that over the past year that you've looked at, like maybe specifically talking about the small credit unions, that you've been able to maybe provide a different level of service or use technology in a different way that maybe was resistant before, that now everybody's like, hey, we're on Zoom every day. So, they don't have to drive to the league office necessarily to get the education that when they're also wearing 4 other hats at the credit union, right?
I think a big learning lesson for us is how valuable virtual learning is. And we did some virtual learning before, but now, to your point, I think that it's opened the door for them to engage not only on the education side, but also on the advocacy side, because all of our Hike the Hills were virtual. And a lot of them, even though we do offer some scholarships, they can't take the time to get out to DC. It's not even just the cost. And they were able to join us virtually with these lawmakers. So I think remembering going forward, not just to be super excited to get back to in person and abandon all that virtual stuff, it's to strategically continue to incorporate it so you can support those smaller asset credit unions. And that's really a major lesson for us from the education and advocacy side.
I think that is such a huge opportunity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, sure, we all want to be in person again too, but
right.
to have that option, I think there could be some powerful stuff that happens there. That's
exactly.
That's cool. How do you personally, and I would even professionally, make sure that you're staying purpose driven? And it's not tough to find. You mentioned 20 years in credit unions. It's not tough to find purpose, right? But there are times when we all kind of veer off and maybe wonder what we're doing. So how do you make sure personally that you're staying purpose driven, but also now as the new leader of the Michigan Credit Union League that you'll stay purpose driven going forward?
Well, I think it's really, I mean, the purpose, I've never really struggled to find it. Like you said, I mean, this industry kind of screams it out loud. And I think just for me, just, you can say that you have a passion for credit union people, and we all say that and feel it. But I'll give you an example. I was thinking about, when I was practicing law for 20 years representing credit unions, I was a litigator and I was facing like major burnout because a litigation attorney, for anyone who's listening or has done that before, it's just a lot, and the burnout rate's pretty high.
Yeah.
And but as a credit union vendor, I would go to our annual convention every year because our law firm represented credit unions. So I was ingrained in the credit union world since really January of 2000. And I remember thinking to myself, well, if I leave the practice of law, I'm going to leave the credit union world because those are my clients. And I was driving back from our annual convention and I was thinking to myself, what if this was the last credit union annual convention you attended? Like you never went again.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I was just so sad. I was so sad to think about it, of not seeing all of these friends. And so I think the purpose for me is it's just something I really want to do. And so I don't really have to stay motivated. And our team at the league is just so great. You really want to show up for them every day. And so are the people that we support. So I haven't had a struggle with purpose. I think my struggle is more finding time to listen to those really intuitive podcasts or read those great leadership books to help develop myself more to be a better, when I do show up, to be better at it. But purpose for me has never been a struggle, fortunately.
That's a
Fortunately.
good thing. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. It is. Yeah, it's important to make the time to grow too, right? Like
Yeah.
it's that's.
Yeah.
I guess I shouldn't say I'm surprised anymore, but often we think of the person in the CEO chair as like knowing all, right? Like as we're younger in life. So it's always when having conversations with CEO and they talk about having a coach and but it's that idea like even Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods had a coach, right? That constant growth that is so important. So
Oh, for sure. Yeah, knowing that you don't know everything is key.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Getting rid of some of the ego, right? But a big picture question for you that I've asked, for a few years now is there something, and I was excited to ask you just because of, your kind of journey here, but is there something that you think credit unions either need to do better or differently to remain relevant in this? It's crazy how fast financial services overall are changing. And even some of the players, if you and I were having this conversation 5 years ago, we'd be like Bank of America, Chase, and now it's Amazon and Apple. And, so is there anything you think we need to do better?
Yeah. Well, when you read what was it, a 65-page letter from Chase's CEO talking about what they're scared about, and they're scared about these fintechs, and this is Chase. So, I think it just comes back to the technology and really trying. We're never going to compete, with that. But I think really tapping into what the members need and knowing that a lot of it is on a technology scale, especially, having a almost 20-year-old and seeing how she banks. It's really eye-opening.
Yeah.
They don't want cash in the birthday card. They don't want Venmo. I have no need for cash, I'm told. And it's just like, whoa, it's just this whole, so it's kind of nice to have somebody at her age really remind me how banking has changed so much. And if she's on the phone for 10 minutes, she's annoyed and wants to hang up. So it's really that tapping into what members find value in and what their experience is like at your credit union and how seamless their experience is. And maybe you can't have the top-notch, technology platform, but you can have a really good call center or, really knowing what the pain points are at your credit union, digging in and eliminating those. So I think it's really just that member experience and making sure that our credit unions, large and small, are supporting those. And I think if you're good at that, if you're good at supporting your current members, you're just going to grow from there and continue to grow is, kind of my thought process on it.
I couldn't agree with you more. We've all gotten so used to seamless, it's, shopping on Amazon or watching Netflix and fast, right? I do feel like I'm with you that's a place that it just seems like across the board, we have to have that user experience that's maybe
Yeah.
a little smoother, because that's what we all
Yeah.
expect now, whether it's your
Right.
20-year-old daughter or my 70-year-old mom.
Exactly. They need different support.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'd like to move on to your career journey. You've mentioned, 20 years in credit unions, a litigator before you came over to the league. So most of us did not grow up going, hey, someday I want to work in credit unions. Like when we were kids, when we were your daughter's age, let's just say. What did you want to be when you were growing up? And, when was it that drive home from the annual convention when you were like, credit unions, this is where I want to be?
Yeah. Well, I stumbled into credit unions. So my dad retired from credit unions. So since I was growing up, I was in credit union lobbies, and, I met some people along the way that said, Patty, I remember when you used to play in our lobby, and now I'm their lawyer, which is just weird. But I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, but I wasn't targeting working in financial services at all. So I knew I was fortunate to know in high school that I wanted to go on to law school, which it was great because a lot of people struggle with that. But then I started in private practice, non-financial services, and I hated my job. And I actually quit that law firm without having a job. So now I'm desperate because student loan is staring me down the face. And I reached out to my dad, and I'm like, I literally called him when my car was full with my stuff from my office. And he's like, well, Patty, I know this credit union attorney. I'll call him and see if he's looking for somebody. And I'm like, I did not want to do that. First off, I didn't need help from my dad. The credit union sounded boring. I wasn't excited about it, but I was like desperate. I was desperate at the time. And so he put me in touch with a really well-known credit union attorney here in Michigan, Chuck Holzman. And Chuck was also in a situation of being desperate because he needed somebody to go to court, and they had just lost an attorney to having a baby. So it was, Chuck and I were both desperate. And I was just like, I need a job. And I started there in January of 2000. And I never left. I never left the industry. And then my brother's a credit union CEO. Okay. So here in Michigan. So it's definitely in my family. And I don't think my brother envisioned working in the financial service industry either. But we just ended up here, and then we never leave, like you hear from so many people.
So if you don't mind me asking, when was that point after you started, you quit the one job, you come over, you're now working in credit unions, where you're like, oh, wait, this isn't boring, or, was there, do you remember when that happened? You're like, oh, I think I'm going to do this for a while.
Well, I think it just comes back to the people. So right away, first year, I went to the annual convention that the Michigan Credit Union League put on. And I just started to get to know the people that I was going to court for. And the thing that really struck me is because I started out doing collection work. So I was a collection attorney for credit unions.
Okay.
And even though that just sounds miserable, right? You're suing somebody because you're trying to take somebody's car, or you're foreclosing on their home. But getting to know the credit union industry and the collection department at credit unions, I was so confident that they do not sue their members initially. That's the last resort for them. They work with them for months, sometimes years. So even though I felt like, oh my gosh, here I am, this collection attorney, I felt confident with every one of those members to say, look, I am here because they tried to work with you for months and you're not cooperating, you're not listening to them. And so I really developed a lot of respect for credit unions and how willing they were to work with their members. And I saw that firsthand, whether it was to help somebody save their car or to help them save their home, or, just at bankruptcy court or in district court at collections. I saw the passion that they had at that early stage, and I really got behind supporting them. And I thought, if they're willing to do this for their members, it was a really unique industry. And I was really proud. I really turned into somebody that was incredibly proud to be in court representing a credit union. So that's
pretty
kind of
cool.
how it started. Yeah.
And how about the inspiration to become the president and CEO of the Michigan Credit Union League?
Well, as I mentioned, I was kind of ready for something beyond litigation, and I had worked with our league off and on, speaking at different events and things like that. And one of these, in 2018, I got a call from Dave Adams saying, hey, Patty, we have an opening. Would you ever be interested in coming to the league? And at that point, it was for the executive vice president COO role. And I'm like, wow, now this sounds really interesting because I'm leaving litigation, but I'm still in the same industry with the same
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
So I met Dave for lunch and we talked about what my role would be. And I didn't look back. I was super excited. Some people ask me, do you miss going to court? Do you miss litigation? I'm like, no, I'm working with the same people and I'm not a vendor anymore. I am
Yeah,
part
yeah.
of the community, and they don't like hide from me at cocktail parties because they're afraid I'm going to try and bill them by the hour. They
Right.
actually want to talk to me now. And, I'm really behind each and every credit union. So, and, that's what's really fun for me. And so to this next stage, it just was very natural. I wasn't sure when Dave would transition out of the league. We never had a commitment that I would even get the job or a certain time period. I think it just organically kind of came to be the right time for him and for our board. And I was just like, okay, so this is the next path for me. And, like I said at the start, I just couldn't be more honored that they would choose me. We have 100% credit union affiliation in Michigan. So I literally represent
It's amazing.
all of our credit unions now. And it's really, really a thrill.
That's very cool. Congratulations again. I have to
Thanks.
say that. I'm just sitting here
Thanks.
smiling, listening to your story. So since it's an audio podcast, people can't see. But
exactly.
Is there something that people who've worked with you and maybe over your career, but the last few years since you've been at the Credit Union League, that they've heard you say so many times they can finish your sentence?
Well, not really heard me say, but I think they put up with me in the sense that, I do ask a lot of questions, and I think they're very comfortable with me and my sense of humor, because I try and to me, work is fun. And if you can't joke around with the people you work with or have a good time or poke fun and them poke fun at me. So I think they've gotten used to my casual nature. So I don't really say the same thing over and over, but I think they've come to expect that I'm just the same person, whether I'm talking to you, Randy, or I'm talking to my team, or I'm talking to a credit union, or I'm in a courtroom. Quite honestly, I'm just very much, I think you get to a certain age where you're just comfortable being yourself. And so I think they just expect the actual Patty to show up each day. And so I try and deliver on that.
That is true. That is one of those things I'm sure we all wish we could learn earlier in life to be ourselves, right?
Exactly. It's wasted and you can't. And I talk to my daughter about that all the time and I get a lot of eye rolls, but it's like, you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out.
At some point after you're 30 or 40,
yeah,
or, I don't know.
Exactly.
I was a slow learner, but I got there, or I'm getting there. How about that? Is there a myth about being a great leader that like just makes your skin crawl? If you could never hear it again, you're like, please stop. That's just not true.
Nothing that I've really come across in terms of myth. I think kind of going back to what we've touched on a little bit about a leader having to know everything about everyone else's job. So like if you're at the top, then you know how all of these other functions work, you know exactly what the CFO does, and you know what the CFO knows, which is so not true in my experience, or you know all of these other positions and their expertise. And I think you learn pretty quickly that you're really just hiring the best people in the room, and sometimes you're not the smartest in the room, and you have to rely on those people. So I think for me, when I was coming up, I would always think of the leader as somebody who, knows the answers to everybody else's positions too. And I think we all kind of debunked that one for a long time. So I don't think that's a really inspiring answer, but I think it's one that I take a lot of comfort in because, they don't know everything and they're not always right. And sometimes they make bad decisions and that's okay. But, I think that's my take on that. No earth-shattering myth, but
You said something interesting there, though, that I think ties into when I asked you about, like, if there's things your team has heard you say, that idea that you ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I mean, I will be honest, that's something I've worked on for the last year, is to listen to understand, not listen to answer. That to me is, and a lot of that came from this podcast, was talking to leaders, and many coming up have those like A-type personalities. And then they're like, oh no, it's the team, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not, but the amount of people that talked about listening on the podcast is like, I probably should do more of that. So I learned too. A lot of these are scratch my own itch questions. So it's just,
exactly.
Outside of credit unions, you mentioned your daughter. What do you do to recharge, and what does work-life integration look like to you?
Well, it's funny because it's really changed for a lot of us now that we're spending so much more time at home. So I did get a COVID puppy, like so many people. I went out and got a puppy. So she's not here today, or you'd probably have seen her by now, but she's a Great Dane.
Boy. Oh, you didn't get a little one either. No.
She's now quite big. But, I like walking her. She breaks up my day for sure. I do have a Peloton, so a shout out to my CU Peloton community on Facebook. There is a credit union group.
Puppies. I think those were the purchases of COVID. That's for sure.
Exactly. So, well, fortunately, I had a Peloton well before COVID because it was really hard to come by one during COVID.
That's right.
You couldn't get one. Yeah. But anyway, so those are the things mainly, and just hanging out with girlfriends, and a special guy in my life currently is a lot of fun. But that's kind of how I decompress and enjoy life.
Shout out to the special guys. I love
it. Don't cut that out so he knows I thought.
No, that's right. No, that's I understand completely. So I actually make sure Jill's on the podcast quite often.
I saw that. I love listening to you guys.
Yeah, great dynamic. That's funny. So it wouldn't be the CUInsight Experience podcast without some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
The questions are rapid, but your answers don't have to be.
Okay.
All right. So take your time. Was there something that you said no to that looking back now, you're like, I'm sure glad I did. Life wouldn't look like this.
Yeah. Well, early on in my credit union litigation career, I applied to work at a larger law firm. And it wouldn't have been representing credit unions. I think that was more of a banking law firm. Yeah. And I got an offer, and actually it was offering me more money. But my daughter at the time was like 3 or 4, and the commute would have been taking me away from her longer, and the hours for sure would have been longer. So I started off at a small law firm, and that's pretty much where I stayed. But we all think about these big plush law firms with the cool lobbies and the 6 figures right away and all of this. And I really contemplated it for a while, but I ultimately turned it down. So I said no to that, and I am so glad I did.
That's and so are we. So we wouldn't know you right now. Wouldn't be having this conversation. Right? So I'm still going to ask you the COVID question. Besides the puppy, is there anything else that you purchased, or maybe something you purchased recently that you're like, wow, I didn't know I needed that, but now I'm not sure how I live without it?
Not that I purchased. Sadly, I purchased a lot of Ben & Jerry's, and I ate too much of it during COVID early on. And then somebody gave me the greatest lesson. They said, Patty, you're probably wearing a lot of yoga pants and stretch pants because no one sees you from the waist down. You need to wear pants with a waistline so you realize that you're actually putting on weight. And so I started to wear my jeans.
Great idea, actually. Yeah, when we were doing these Zooms.
Yeah, I didn't have your experience, Randy, of losing weight. I was in the opposite camp where I gained weight. So
trust me, mine's been more recent. I gained I had a high number to start from the past year of COVID. Yeah. So
Oh God! So I'm back on track now, and I'm getting out, and But that was bad.
To do it. So what was Patty like in high school? And is there any memorable trouble? I don't expect you or anybody else to beat one of your colleagues, Diana Dykstra's Grand Theft Auto, but any memorable trouble you're willing to share?
Well, in high school, I was a debate geek. Not surprising. I was on the debate team. So
to be an attorney,
yeah, drove around in a minivan with my fellow debaters to different tournaments. So that's kind of the picture that I'll leave you with there. As far as trouble, I was a pretty good kid, but I didn't steal a car, but I borrowed my parents' car before I had my license. And I ended up hitting, some people have those huge like boulders in their yard as decorative. I ended up somehow landing the car on top of that to where it needed to get towed off. So that was unfortunate. But that was,
I think many of us have those stories. My younger sister did the same thing with some of her girlfriends before she was 16. And I had the other car, and that was pre-cell phones, obviously. And somehow I got home and got in trouble for not, I don't know what, but it was just like, your sister's doing this. I'm like, I don't remember.
No.
So my mom listens to the podcast. She's going to be like, you didn't get in trouble. Yeah, I remember. So anyways, is there a book you're currently reading that you're enjoying? Or, a question that I've always asked, is there that book that you just think everyone should read or that you've gifted others?
Well, I haven't gifted it yet, but I've encouraged people to read Untamed by Glennon Doyle. So I don't know if that's one Jill has on her shelf, but I loved it. It's a great book. I'm proud of the fact that at the League we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion team. And so I did read the book Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. And heavy read.
I have not read that yet, but that's one that Jill was reading recently, and she's like, "You have to read this," and it's sitting on the nightstand. It's like on my list that I'm going to get to. Yeah, I haven't read it yet.
So it's a heavy read, but it was very eye opening. So those are the two that come top of mind that I've talked about a lot over the last 6 months.
Awesome. You're adding to our list. That is a good thing.
Great.
The random question: what is the greatest album of all time?
Well, I thought about this. I have a very eclectic music taste, but I keep coming back to, and I can't leave him, Bruce Springsteen. So I would have to say, The River, I saw him in concert where he performed the whole album from front to finish, and I loved it. But I also really like a lot of the songs on Born to Run. So tie between those. But then I really struggled as well. Purple Rain is one of my favorites. So yeah,
that is to me one of that is up there in mine. I will tell you that is one of the greatest albums of all time.
I feel very old with these old albums, but those are my choices.
my guess is we're in the same age range. How about that? Just because of what you're choosing to. It's always interesting for me on the podcast because when people are saying, I'm like, okay, we're probably within a gap there. So, so there's a question that I didn't send you in advance. When you hear the word success, who is the first person who comes to mind and why?
Oh boy. Like, I'm having a blank. Success? I don't know. I mean, because there's so many definitions of success, right? And I don't think of it in terms of money. And I guess one of the things that I think of when I think of success in a person is somebody who is famous, and that's Brené Brown. And I think that just to obtain success by being vulnerable and teaching other people to be vulnerable and really leading with that on her Dare to Lead books and this kind of cult following that she has, to start off as kind of like this boring researcher of a person, like, collecting all of her data, and to just really turn it into a way to help other people and be 100% herself. To me, that's successful. It's not because she's famous and probably makes a pretty decent living now. And I know just having fun seeing how much she would charge to come to an event is like earth shattering. Right. But so she's definitely been successful.
There's a reason we haven't seen her at a conference.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So, she won't be at the ACNE anytime soon. But I think to me, if you can find something that you're passionate about and you can be excited to talk about and really thrive in that, to me, that is success. And she's somebody that just comes top of mind that's just really seems to have found her calling. And so I admire people that can take something and turn it into something that's fun for them and that other people really enjoy and they benefit from it. And not to be cheesy, but I think about, Randy, with your podcast and the success you've had with that. Obviously, you have fun doing it. Obviously, people want to be on it. You've got great, people, the movers and shakers in credit union land. And that's success, right? I mean, that's taking something where you can be anywhere and do it and enjoy it and bring some value to other people is my definition of success. And luckily, we have a lot of people like that we can look to.
Absolutely. I appreciate that as well. It is a lot of fun. And I've always said on this podcast that it was from like our conversation at GAC, or, I always felt so fortunate that this career that I have, I get to go out and talk to a bunch of smart people in credit unions all the time, but to actually share those conversations with others, I thought there may be a benefit. So,
it's great.
I loved your answer. I will tell you this. It is my favorite question because of what you said in the beginning when you were thinking about it. It's we all define success differently. There's no one way to define it, right? So it's I thought your answer was fantastic. So thanks for thinking on it. Sorry to put you on the spot, but that's what I do.
No worries.
Well, that is the perfect way to wrap up. Thank you again, Patty, for being on the show, and congratulations again. The last question that I have for you, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share or asks of our audience?
Well, not really asks, I guess thoughts. I'm just, the last few weeks have been really fun for me. I mean, of course, hearing from everybody with the new position change and, so many people have supported me in my career here in Michigan, and they've really been so excited for me and really excited about the league. And, thanks to them. And it's just been a lot of fun. And I'm really excited about what the future holds and, being included in things like this and really getting to know my other league presidents that we talked about earlier. I just attended my first league president meeting last week, and I'm excited to network and engage with other associations around the country. And I really look forward to getting to know and network with them. And so they better watch out because I'm going to be contacting them soon. Yeah, I'm coming. I'm coming to a city near you as soon as we can get together.
That is awesome. It's a great group of people too. I've been lucky enough to meet most of them and call many of them friends now. So it's amazing. Well, thank you again, Patty, for being here. This was so much fun. I can't wait for our paths to cross. Hopefully we're all getting a little bit closer to that. We will link to everything we talked about in the show notes today. If people have more questions of you, what's your poison? Email, Twitter, LinkedIn? How should they get a hold of you?
Oh, they can always email me. You can put that in there. Happy to hear from anyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Patty. Have a great day and be well, my friend.
All right. Thanks. You too, Randy. Take care.
Before we go, I would just like to send out a thank you to all of you for listening today and letting us have this much fun producing this show and doing what we do. And once again, a thank you to Patty for taking the time out of her busy schedule to share her experiences with all of us. And a huge thank you to our sponsors, PSCU. Our friends at PSCU have been a longtime partner of ours and a supporter of ours at CUInsight. So please make sure to click on their link in the show notes, give them some love, see everything they have going on to help out the credit union community. A couple last things. Don't forget to subscribe to on your favorite podcast player, Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, whatever it is, we're there. And then lastly, the CUInsight Experience podcast book list, the book Patty mentioned, and many, many more from every guest that's been on the show over the years. You can find them all in one place. So get your summer read on. Thank you all again for listening. I hope you have an amazing day and be well, friends.